Hello everyone, Dr. Christine Smith back for a really interesting live today with my good friend Dr. Sam Shay, and he is an expert in genetics and functional medicine as well as being on the spectrum because he describes himself as neurospicy and is one of my favorite people to talk to about this because he's highly educated, highly intelligent, and has a perspective of the world that a lot of people don't have. So I want we can do to really create sustainability in our lives and manage how our physiology is different because the body is both complex and simple, and when we can start to understand it in these ways we can affect so many things in our life in a positive way. So hello, Dr. Sam, thanks so much for joining us. I'm so glad you're here.
Same. It's good to see you, Christine.
You
Dr.
too.
Smith. It's so weird to call you Dr. Smith. Oh my God.
I
You,
know, right? Like, yeah, we know each other too well, but yeah, you can just call me Christine. That's fine.
okay.
So happy to have you here and happy to have you to educate people about something they may not have totally thought of or heard about. And we can just start a little bit with just talking about genetics. And I'd also love if you could share with people a little bit about how you got here and what made you fall in love with this particular niche.
Yeah. So I started into natural health and functional medicine just out of necessity. It follows a very similar arc of the wounded healer, as just my particular journey has different details, but it's a very classic arc of I was very sick as a child, starting at age 6, and I was dealing with really lots and lots of stress at school and at home. I had eating disorder. I had severe insomnia, really bad gut problems. Turns out I contracted Lyme disease at summer camp. I had dealing with 2 addictions: one to sugar, one to video games.
People
And
forget those can be addictions.
yeah, they're actually, like, I think, the 2 most common addictions. If you were to like, there's sugar and then there's video games. So if you move up a layer, it's more like food and screens. So it's uh, it's nourishment and entertainment. Uh,
Connection,
yeah,
right?
bread and circus, quite the modern bread and circus, basically. The and my parents, who were both psychiatrists, basically determined that I needed to be medicated into submission as opposed to deal with the root problems of what was causing the insomnia, the digestive problems, the addictions, and a lot of it was due to stress at home and the violence and so on at school that was not being addressed. And I decided in high school that I had to take control of my health because I wasn't the pathway I was going was only making things worse. I was supposed to be a 3rd-generation medical doctor in my family, and instead I took a hard pivot into natural medicine. And when I went to chiropractic school in Texas, and then later on, and then while there, really got into functional neurology, started doing the first functional medicine in terms of testing. This is back in the mid 2000s or so, and then went into practice and became also an acupuncturist, and then really got into genetics back in 2016. And it was genetics that really kind of fit my brain, along with functional testing. And I've been struggling with so many health issues. And when I finally got my genetics test, I mean, this is true. Like, I actually sat and cried for quite a while because I actually had answers in front of me, not just why always felt very vulnerable health wise. I didn't understand why I was like the sickest person in the room, almost always, but everyone else seemed to be so much healthier despite the same food, same environment, same toxic exposure, etc. And what I found was that genetically I had a really, really strong clusters in certain areas. Like, I call myself a hyperinflamer, genetically, and also had real problems with vitamin D utilization, real problems with methylation, issues with some key liver detox pathways, and several other things that were going on. Like, I was eating completely wrong. Like, my diet was actually better suited as low carb paleo as opposed to Mediterranean. And I'll give one example. Is like, at the time in genetics, is my mid 30s. I had really bad joint pain across all my fingers. Like I had arthritis like an old man. And I've been doing like my 1 gram of fish oil every day, and I've been doing all sorts of other functional tests. And just the pain in my fingers was just not going away, and it was alarming because it was getting worse. And then when I saw my genetics, I realized, oh, I have an entire genetic vulnerability to hyperinflammation that manifests in my case as joint pain, as well as skin rashes and easily anxious and agitated and insomnia. And then when I looked at my genetics and saw this pattern, then some new avenues, some new tools opened up that I hadn't even considered, because there's a whole different type of nutritional approach called nutrigenomic dosing as opposed to nutritional dosing. And within like a month or two of changing it, all my joint pain just went away because I had actually changed. I wasn't merely adding some omega-3s to the existing machinery. I changed the entire inflammatory machinery. And that's what shifted. Same thing with changing my diet. Within a week, the digestive problems and these like really weird energetic ups and downs after meals like stopped. And it was just knowing my genetics was just a master unlock that I didn't even realize existed. And so that was 10 years ago. And the good thing about genetics is that it's like the one test that people can do no matter what their state of health or what their age. And they have this roadmap for life. And it's like if I were to pick one test people can do, is just do genetics and like use that as your platform, and then you can layer on other tests as well. But it's like the dividends of a genetics test are for life, because other functional tests are extremely useful. I use them all the time, like literally all the time.
It's like learning what machinery you have so that the other tests give you a map of like what you're moving through.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you actually like learn the structure. And I think these shape the foundations of physical health, and then it affects our energy, our metabolism, inflammation, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'd love if you could also touch for people, whether they're on the spectrum or not, of just how much lifestyle can override that blueprint, and how the genetics framework can be this map of how people can override it themselves, just as you're saying, where
Sure.
you changed everything.
Yeah, the best example is look at a genetically identical twins. And you have one twin really has their sleep, exercise, mindset, nutrition, social life routines, and has really just dialed in everything. And the other one is the opposite. Identical genetics, two completely different health expressions. And what genetics, if someone has an air quotes bad gene, that gene will not physically change to a good gene, but the behavior of that quote bad gene can change to act like the good gene. So in the genetics, the jargon is the red dot, yellow dot, green dot, which is basically red dot is you got two air quotes bad copies, one from mom, one from dad. A yellow dot is air quotes one bad copy and one air quotes good copy, and then green dot is two air quotes good copies together. So green, yellow, red. A red dot will never be a green dot. A yellow dot will never be a green dot, but consistent, proper lifestyle changes will epigenetically, epi meaning above, around, surrounding, will change the expression of that red and yellow dot to behave more green-like. The problem is that if one does not consistently do those lifestyle modifications that are more harmonious with a more green-like expression, your genes will default back to red and yellow expression. It's the default will go back to red and yellow. So the good news is that even though people can have a sea of red and yellow dots, like me, in fact, I was for the first 7 years of me doing genetics, I had the gold medal in the Crappy Gene Olympics. Out of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests that I ran, I was the number one most red and yellow dotted person. I'm so proud in some weird way. And then I got dethroned in like a couple summers ago to silver place, and then I got dethroned again into bronze as a bronze medalist in the Crappy Gene Olympics. And the so I'm sharing this, obviously not so ironically claim that I have the worst genes ever. It's that as a living testament that you can have really bad health genes, like really bad, and still make very, very, very significant positive changes and feel them and live them. So epigenetics is the it's the good news. It's the empowering part of genetics. A lot of people, I have a problem with like what I would call Western genetics versus what I do is called functional genetics. Western genetics is very much good gene, bad gene. You're doomed. Good luck with that. Hope enjoy your medication and might as well binge on the Twinkies on Tuesday because red dot world. Oh well, sucks to be you. And that's it. It's people who read like a genetics profile and they have a very Western mindset. They can careen quite rapidly into nihilistic fatalism. Like, oh, I guess I have these red dots. Oh well, I'll just give up now until things are so bad enough.
And then you're more likely to have that outcome because of those choices.
Yeah, it's a very self-fulfilling prophecy. Not to say like, and I'm also not wanting to minimize that there are very real hard-coded genetic variations that are quite difficult to overcome. And even those that are like trisomy 21, like there's some like real hardwired things that are really a struggle. But what is the answer to that also to support that genetic reality anyway? It's to do the beneficial lifestyle, diet, nutrition things even more. So even if someone has a hard-coded genetic issue that is meaningful, permanent, and is very, very, very difficult to shift even a little bit epigenetically from that one gene's perspective, still attending to all the other epigenetic realities to help get those other red dots to behave more green-like, even if there's a couple outliers, it's very hard to, it's still going to be the same philosophy applies as opposed to just giving up in the face of this one gene or one cluster of genes that are very, very hard to nudge towards the green dot expression.
So that is such a great example of all of this, of just how people can realize that when they have this specific structure in place. So like, let's take a very commonly known one, the MTHFR. And if for people that don't know that one, it's basically like you don't process folate well. I'm one of those people. It's about 40% of the population. And it's most of the people that we have coming into our office because they tend to struggle with more health issues. What this means is that you basically have a genetic, what's called a SNP, like a single nucleotide polymorphism, so like a slight variance. And this just means that you don't process your folate as well, which is B9. And so it's harder for you to get it into your system. Now, this is a very important pathway, and it can also involve B12 and other things, but it really has to do with your ability to detox and build neurotransmitters and detox your hormones and even make other molecules. Methylation is our body's ability to essentially move a carbon and 3 hydrogens around to build other molecules in our body. If we can't build those molecules, your whole system backs up. And then you mix that with, say, like some bad glutathione genetics, and all of a sudden you have a recipe for you can't detox black mold. And for any of you who've been following me for a while, you know that I went through that. And those people need different kinds of care than other people. This is why you can have 2 people in the same home with some kind of toxin exposure, and one person's totally fine, and the other person feels terrible, and the fine person thinks that they're crazy because they don't understand, and the person who feels terrible is like living in the worst reality of their life. So it's an interesting thing when we think about these, and then we start to look at how this can affect things in utero and neurodevelopmental stuff. And this is where Dr. Sam is a total expert in this. So I'd love if you could share your opinion on those things and like having to do with chemical exposures or food additives or toxins or nutrients or any of those things. And all of this is relevant to anybody, no matter your genetics or no matter if you're on the spectrum or not. If you can understand these, someone in your life is dealing with it.
Yeah, you mentioned methylation, which I think methylation, the MTHFR gene was kind of the first real gene that went public. I think it suffers or benefits rather from like the founder's effect. It was the first to market, so I think it has an unfair, oversized purchase in the consciousness. And my opinion is that MTHFR is not even the top 5 most important genes as it relates to health. Not even close.
Ooh, I'd love to hear your top 5 as you go along.
Okay, so VDR1, VDR2, interleukin 6, TNF alpha, and the fifth one I would put up as the interleukin 10s, is just as a general. I mean, there's interleukin 10 1 dash 1 dash 2 dash 3.
And for the less sciencey brains, can you say that in
Oh,
English?
sorry. I just assume my nerd just radiates out like a field. Okay, so the MTH. So here's why I'm taking such an inflammatory. Get that statement? See what I did there? See that? Is that our little genetics humor for all you folks out there? Um, the So someone in the comments said help. Is that help around my very bad genetics humor?
And as we go, you guys, please feel free to ask questions. Like, that's why I actually do these as lives rather than a podcast, is so you guys have the chance to ask questions. So type them in the comments and I'll ask them to Dr. Sam as we go along. And also one of the reasons I invited him on is because he's one of my funniest friends and I love our chats. So you keep going. You're doing great.
Thank you. So the reason why I made such an inflammatory statement is because quite literally methylation is actually controlled by inflammation. That what's unique about the genetics that I run, Fit Genes, is that we've prioritized the genes in order of what is superordinate, what controls the ones underneath it, and this is an aspect of genetics that's very rarely talked about. Because the problem with the other genetics tests out there is they present you like 150, 100, 200, 300 more genes of all apparent equal value and weight, which is categorically false. Not all genes have equal power and measure and influence in the body, not even close. And like you can argue there's hundreds of genes related directly or indirectly to inflammation, but there's about a dozen to a dozen and a half that are the top ones that influence everything else downstream. You've got the interleukin 1s, interleukin 6, the TNF alpha, interleukin 8, interleukin 18, interleukin 10s, the COX genes, the CRP genes. Those in total are like 15, 16, 17 major genes there. And they control things from the top down, including methylation. In fact, when Gary Brecka was on Rogan back in December of, I think, 23, and he was just saying, these 5 methylation genes are the only 5 genes you need to test. And I was like literally screaming into my podcast player. And when I get angry, you know me, I make a PowerPoint. So I just went in and just collected all my receipts from the research and showing how inflammation controls methylation, and then the same liver detox either controls methylation from the top or it's bidirectional. Same thing with the VDR, the vitamin D receptor genes. And by the way, and I would put vitamin D receptor genes as actually the 2 most important genes for health. And so just to give some explanation, TNF alpha, interleukin 6, and the interleukin 10 genes, those are the 3 most important inflammatory based genes. Interleukin 6 and TNF alpha, they're kind of the routers for all the other inflammatory inputs, but interleukin 10 are the fire extinguishers. So if people have variants, yellow, red dots, and interleukin 10s, they have a very hard time putting out any inflammation. But what's interesting about the VDR genes is that people think of, oh, vitamin D. Yeah, well, there's making vitamin D from sun. There's about 6 genes between sunlight and your bloodstream in terms of converting cholesterol into vitamin D. But getting vitamin D into the blood is only half the battle. Getting it from the blood into your cells is the other half of the battle. You can get vitamin D into your blood from supplements, sunlight, and food. But getting into your cells is a completely different story. That involves the VDR genes, vitamin D receptors. They're basically docking sites on the cells that can grab vitamin D as it floats by, and then vitamin D is then brought into the cell, and then it goes into vitamin D is technically a hormone. It actually goes into the nucleus and is a transcription factor and controls, and this is what's mind-blowing. Vitamin D controls anywhere from 3 to 5% of your entire genome. That's 1/20th to 1/33 of your entire DNA.
Vitamin D is basically a hormone, guys. That's how important it is.
I think it was just misnamed because when they discovered it so early, it was just everything was vitamin, but it's actually a hormone. And so what happens is that vitamin D's major control over the body is mostly over controlling inflammation immune system, not just bone density. Vitamin D has been pigeonholed into this bone density trope. And really what it does is a master regulator of inflammation and the immune system. Now, I think that we can agree that you can draw a straight line to effectively every chronic disease and its connection to not being able to deal with inflammation, that there's some connection to it. So if your vitamin D metabolism is affected, then your relationship to chronic disease is going to get much, much closer. Now, to bring some anecdata to this, when in practice, I've analyzed, because most of the people that come to see me, most people are like people dealing with chronic issues. Not all. I mean, I deal with a couple biohackers and forward thinking in the sense that they don't have a chronic thing to do. They're just wanting to be optimal. Not to say that people who are dealing with chronic disease aren't forward thinking. It's just
We'll say those that come in a bad state.
bad say they want to get out of. People want to go from chronic to normal versus normal to optimal. Most of the people that I see are chronic. They want to see chronic to normal. Love working also with normal to optimal, but they're just rarer in my practice. Now, the chronic people, myself included, when I looked at all my chronic clients and I looked at all of them who ran genetics, every single person who had a chronic issue, with only one exception, had yellow or red variants in their VDR receptors. Every single one. The one who didn't, when she had double greens, she had horrific chronic stress from really, really bad, really, I don't want to go into details, really, really bad stuff that's happened to her. And that, as you of all people know this, that can override any green dot imaginable. And so that's kind of the exception that proves the rule. And I saw everyone who struggled with a chronic disease, chronic issues, had yellow and red dots in their VDR receptors. I did something further. I then went to the founder of FitGenes, Dr. Beaver, and I've got 2 interviews of him on my YouTube channel. He doesn't give interviews, but he let me do interviews with him. And I said, Dr. Beaver, I would like you to look at, you have access to the master database. You also know the other clinicians like myself who deal with a lot of chronic things. I want you to reach out to your top 3 and ask them, do they see the same pattern of yellow and red dots in VDR genes and the connection to correlation to chronic disease? He got back to me, I can't remember if it was a month or 2 months later, but he said, basically, you're 100% correct. This is exactly the pattern that they're seeing and that I'm seeing in the database. So when I say that MTHFR it's important, but I wouldn't put it the most important. That's the basis of where I'm coming from.
So if I were to kind of conceptualize and summarize what he just said for you guys, so methylation is kind of like your body's mail delivery system. It's how your system communicates.
I call it the barcoding. In like when you barcode something, you know where it's going. It's the same thing. It's like the mail, but it's like you barcode it in the grocery store and
like
whatever.
a communication organizational system that also allows you to build new molecules. The other genes that he's talking about are these master inflammatory switches in the body. And if you are having these big inflammation components going on and you're unable to control it, it's basically like your body is under fire all the time. And so your body's just living in this state of like constantly being at war. So if we can control these inflammatory factors, that is probably one of the most important things you can do for any form of disease, or we'll say dis-ease, meaning dis-ease in the body before it becomes disease. And someone had asked earlier, like, how do I control my inflammation? And somebody else has asked, does megadosing vitamin D help if your receptors
I'm happy
are
to
impaired?
address that.
I was about to say, I'm not a huge fan of megadosing, and especially like back to back, but I'd be curious to hear Dr. Sam's opinion on that. I think it has different roles at different times, but there is such a thing as with megadosing, you can actually make your receptors retract, and it's harder to get vitamin D into the cells. So that is a thing. My favorite form of vitamin D is just go get sunlight on your abdomen for like 20 minutes a day, please, if you can. And then, so let's address the whole, how do I reduce my inflammation? And then we can address the vitamin D megadosing. And then it kind of leads into my next question is like, how do environmental exposures like food additives, toxins, and nutrient deficiencies play a role in all this?
Sure. So So how to reduce inflammation? There's the general understanding of how to reduce inflammation. Then there's the targeted, individual, customized approach to how to reduce one's inflammation. So if you're doing the general side of things, there's a couple major buckets that are mostly useful for most people, which is um, look at your overall lifestyle. Like, for example, interleukin 10 is, look at like sleep, for example, and bring this back to genes. Interleukin 10 is the major anti-inflammatory or fire extinguisher gene in the body. Well, when you sleep, you've got a lot of anti-inflammatory activity going on, especially in the gut, where most of the inflammation is kind of being expressed, unless you've got like a chronic injury in a joint or something that's adding to the pool. If you have bad gut dysbiosis, or then it's going to affect your ability to generate interleukin 10 in your body. You're also going to not have enough melatonin, which melatonin is one of those strongest anti-inflammatory compounds that we naturally produce. So if you have terrible sleep, you're going to have more inflammation. So looking at sleep, you're looking at proper exercise, and by proper, I mean you need to move, and you also need to move in a way that promotes growth hormone and testosterone, and also you need to not overmove, and either that leads to injury or over exercising. And by the way, I actually did a lecture at a genetics conference called Exercise-Induced Obesity, which is a very specific type of genetic combination where you have people you see this a lot in the CrossFit community, where you've got people, they exercise so much, but they develop, like, they start to lose their visible muscle tone. They have this like washed out reddish ruddy skin, and you don't see the cutness of their muscles.
And this is different for everybody. It's based on how depleted is your body when you're pushing it that hard.
It's a mixture of how depleted plus how inflaming your genetics are, and how poorly your liver detoxes estrogen. So it's a combination of things. So genetics will tell you what your ideal is and also where your weakest links are. So you can have people who have exact same environment and exact same lifestyle, but different genetics. They'll express different, air quotes, diseases and problems. It's because the bad lifestyle will expose the weakest link in their genetic chain, and that chain will break. And so people can have, so for example, the people who develop exercise-induced obesity, what happens is they're hyperinflammers, meaning that when you over-exercise, they cross this line where now too much exercise becomes pro-inflammatory instead of net anti-inflammatory. And when you have too many inflammatory chemicals in your body, the solution to pollution is dilution. So your body will retain water in the interstitia, which is a fancy way of saying you'll retain water in between your cells to prevent as much as possible all this inflammatory chemicals from hitting and cutting and damaging your cells and tissues. So this is where this like water weight and kind of ruddy, watery, washed out appearance looks in people who overexercise. And then I've also seen it where women can lose their cycles from overexercising, and also men can develop man boobs. And the reason why is that when I saw is that when men are over exercising, they become hyperinflammatory. They become inflammatory, but they're specifically hyperinflammatory because in their inflammatory genes, I mentioned the CRP genes, those are the acute phase inflammation genes, inflammation proteins in the liver. So if the liver is overwhelmed with inflammation, it's going to prioritize the inflammation over detox. Like if your kitchen's on fire and your garbage can is full, what's the priority? Obviously, it's the grease fire. Obviously. So estrogen detox is going to be put on the back burner. I'm just kind of mixing kitchen metaphors here.
No, this is great.
So estrogen is going to be put on the back burner because inflammation is the danger. So what happens is that when you have males who are creating lots of inflammation, they have genetic vulnerabilities to hyperinflammation, particularly they can't clear it well in the liver. And they have problems genetically clearing estrogen because their GSTP1 gene is out to lunch because it's red or yellow dot, and they're just hyperinflamed. They can't prioritize estrogen detox. Well, what happens when you have excess water weight that layers on weight on the body, plus a lot of estrogen to distribute that weight onto, say, I don't know, the chest? You get man boobs. Now, clinically, when I had two case studies in my practice that I based this entire presentation on. When I identified their genes and they had their lifestyle that was promoting estrogen exposure as well. So they were having heated plastics, lots of pesticides on vegetables, soy products. They had exposure to phthalates and just other things that promoted lots of estrogen exposure in their system. So they were flooding their body exogenously with estrogen and they couldn't clear it and they were hyperinflaming. What I did is I didn't tell them, everyone else was telling these overweight men with man boobs to eat less and exercise more. That was exactly the wrong thing to tell them, like exactly the wrong thing to tell them. Instead, I identified all the toxic exposures of estrogen, all the external sources of additional inflammation, which their bodies certainly didn't need more of. I helped them reduce their overexercise and focus on walking and saunas and massages to get rid of the lymphatic drainage, and to change their diets. Those anti-inflammatory and gut and liver detoxing, and gave them the proper anti-inflammatory and liver detox supplements based on their genetics. One guy lost 40 pounds in 1 month, 40 pounds, and including all the weight off of his chest. Another guy lost 2 pounds a week for, it was like 11 or 13 weeks, or some prime number above 10, I can't remember. That's all I remember. But he lost 2 pounds a week consistently for about 3 months. And the joint pains went away, and then the fat came off of his chest. And it wasn't exercise more and eat less. It was look at their genetics, look at their lifestyle, change their lifestyle, look at the environmental inputs, look at everything from get them on the right nutrients, get them on the right diet, all these other things, and the body healed itself because they were now living a lifestyle that was congruent with their genetics.
So I love this. And let's give a real life example for people for a second. So the cascade of like how these things can happen are basically like, let's say you have the genetics set up for this. And then let's say part of your lifestyle is that you buy meat from the grocery store and you're not very conscious about where it comes from because someone just asked a question, can the soy from animal feeds be consumed through meats? Heck yeah. If
Yeah.
you are feeding animals the wrong thing and you're messing up their microbiome and their hormones, and then you're eating that animal, you're eating their messed up hormones and microbiome, and you're eating the estrogenic effects. So let's say this person is eating that, and then they're working out super hard because their doctor that doesn't understand hormones or genetics told them to. And then let's say that's causing a lot of cortisol release. And then the cortisol is starting to affect blood sugar. And then that blood sugar is starting to further inflame them because of their predisposition genetically. And then now this person's getting stressed out because they're not losing their weight. And this is more cortisol. And then did you guys know that the microbes in your gut actually have receptors for things like adrenaline, which can come from working out too hard, epinephrine and cortisol? And then you actually start to grow bad microbes in your gut. And then these start to produce toxins in your blood and cause leaky gut, which then can cause further weight gain and weird hormone stuff and inflammation. So people get locked in this cycle, and then it progresses for a while and they don't understand because they feel like they're doing everything right. And they're like, I'm eating like just steak and greens. Like, I don't get it. But if your steak is from like a conventional farm where those animals are stressed out and treated horribly and fed crap, that's not the right steak for you. And so this is why food choices matter. And this is why epigenetics matter. And if you can just be like, oh, I need to buy this brand instead of this brand, and I actually need to work out less and drink more water and maybe like go for a walk and be in the sunlight, and that's my solution. Doesn't that sound easier? And I'm not saying like don't work out. I'm saying find what's right for you. And that's where like the genetic stuff can come in.
Yeah, you can genetically determine, like, some people are genetically vulnerable to additional, like, slow collagen repair or being hyperinflammatory, so it's harder to repair. So I'm one of those people. So the way that I have found a way to work out, according to my genetics, is I do safe you heard of HIIT, high intensity interval training?
Yeah.
I've renamed it safe high intensity interval training, or SHIIT.
Because you can
Pronounce
tank your
that.
adrenals if you're depleted.
Yeah, exactly. So the little visual pun there of SHIIT versus HIIT. So when I say safe high intensity interval training, is that there's general guidelines that can obviously be more drilled in based on whatever practitioner you're working with. But in general, it's like doing only high intensity interval training 2 to 3 times a week at most, with a minimum of 1 day of rest in between, and doing I make a distinction between exercise and movement. I mean, to some people, some people hear the word exercise, it's like a 4-letter word. So I changed the thing to movement. So one of the healthiest things people can do with their movement patterns is to get a dog and walk it. And I've actually prescribed get a dog.
And all that.
Yeah, there's tons of all sorts of wonderful things with the dog. So safe high intensity interval training 2 to 3 times a week with a minimum 1 day break in between, and then movement each day, and then extra movement on the days in between the safe high intensity interval training. So you actually program in that same time you allot for more intense exercise. You're still keeping the rhythm of that time is allotted for movement, or you can swap in recovery, like if you have access to saunas, or you do like Qigong. I also do Qigong. I do Qigong instead of, which is a movement practice, instead of safe high intensity interval training. And then for, I want to go back to the beef thing. So some people listening to this may very rightly say, well, I'm in a food desert, or organic beef is expensive. Even organic beef can be fed soy and other things, like one of the people just mentioned. So there are solutions now, and one is to get a 5 foot cubic chest freezer from any hardware store, which can hold about 120 pounds of meat, something like that, and then order a quarter cow or an eighth of a cow, or split it, and what you'll get is from like a pasture-fed, pasture-finished rancher, of which now there's a massive infrastructure that's been built over the past 5 years to deliver within the continental states almost anywhere, to buy quarter cows, half cows, eighth of a cow, you split it with friends, and it is cheaper, it tastes better, it's like logs more healthy for you. And there's ways to buy really healthy, the healthiest meat at the cheapest per pound cost, in just in bulk. And so and if you can, if it's outside your budget at the moment, then just find a couple of families to split, local families to split it. And so there are solutions to this that actually fit within budget.
A cow share when you're looking
cow share, yeah, cow share. I mean, or you just find a rancher. It also depends on your state laws, like what you're able to do, what can be shipped in, etc. I've bought from a rancher now for the past 5 years, something like that, and I know, and he's a rancher that was conventional, went full pasture fed, finished, and now teaches other ranchers to switch away from conventional.
And so what you're looking for when you look for that, guys, is like grass-fed, grass-finished.
Grass-fed,
and you literally see a difference in the color of the meat.
Totally, and the taste. And so it's grass-fed, grass-finished. So there, and you have to make that distinction, because some cattle can be grass-fed, but they finish it on corn or whatever because it changes the fat marbling and all the rest of it. And there's also like additional meats available in the state, like bison and elk, and it's hunting season at the moment, so there are ways to like find local butcher shops and see if they are that deal with game meat, and see if there's like extras left over from people who just wanted a trophy buck when they just don't want the bottom of the 300 pounds of elk, and you can get it there.
So I love all of this. We could talk for hours on this stuff. And you guys, if you have questions, feel free to like comment on this afterwards. We'll be watching the feed and we'll answer your questions and everything, especially comments on the recording. But I also wanted to dive into, so we talked about the physical body of like inflammation, gut health, mitochondrial function, those types of things, how genetics can affect these things, and the inflammation. Then we talked about some chemical exposures. I even saw someone in the feed said that her son is dealing with a mold exposure, which is such a thing. And it can be hard to detox. And for that, it can be really good to work with a practitioner. But Dr. Sam and I both have extensive education on our channels for free that you can go watch and learn more about that. But I wanted to dive into the mental emotional component of
Hmm.
things. Because, so it's like we've talked about physical body, chemical body, now we're talking about the mental body. This is
Hmm.
holistic care. And the mental body, this is really about how you manage stress, and your genetics make you more of a, like, be more oriented towards being stressed out more or having more anxiety and a whole bunch of things like that. And with this, I mean, this involves sensory processing, focus, connection. And when we start to think about how different people interact in the world and how they have different perceptions, you can see how these things would affect our neurological development,
Hmm.
and then what we experience in childhood, whether we had a lot of stress, like you mentioned in the beginning, and then we have a predisposition towards inflammation. It can then change how our neurons develop. And then this is really how we get, you know, the concepts of the spectrum, which is basically like, where is your neurology in
Hmm.
the spectrum of neurotypical versus neurospicy versus the far end of the spectrum. So I'd love to hear your opinion around the mental component of all this.
Sure. So when we're talking about there, what genetics does is it sets up how tightly wound up your emotional responses and how tightly wound your threat detection systems are. And then if you have found a way to live in a way in which you're not you've created an environment, a social structure, and an internal mental culturing of your own mental state. Even if you have a very highly refined hypervigilance system, if it's not if it's not triggered, if it's not interpreted, then that system is not going to fire off. But if you've got someone who has a not very tightly wound up hypervigilance system, and they're living in a stressful environment, they're not going to express as strongly a chronic stress response as someone with a very tightly wound hypervigilance system with the same stressful environment. So with I'll just name a couple of genes, for example, that relate to the to one's mental state. So we've already mentioned the inflammatory genes, and if you're inflamed, if you're at high risk of inflammation, that means your frontal lobes are going to suffer, and your mitochondria are going to suffer, because if you're more inflamed, your mitochondria and your neurons are going to be damaged, and you're going to retreat back into more your lizard brain and your animal brain as opposed to your frontal lobes. Then we've got the methylation genes have a lot to do with mood regulation, and one of the more famous ones next to MTHFR is COMT. And the COMT gene has actually been called the warrior or worrier gene. And what COMT does, COMT creates the enzyme that breaks down things like dopamine and adrenaline in the brain. So if you have a red or yellow dot, I myself have a yellow dot in COMT, then you don't make enough enzyme to break down the hyperstimulating chemicals in the brain. So it's like that hypervigilance. It's like stress hormones and dopamine is just on all the time because you don't have the things to kind of keep the tide lower.
Your stress lingers longer,
Correct. Stress lingers longer, and it's just
builds up.
it's just the hypervigilance. It's just a more finely higher tuned hypervigilance response. Um, and then uh, and then on top of that, if you've got variations in, say, what we call the CBS pathway, the CBS, it's the fancy word is a transsulfuration pathway. You can't actually easily get rid of homocysteine. You have a whole your body has 3 ways to get rid of homocysteine. It's that bad
Which
of a
is
chemical.
think of it as like a junk floating around in the bloodstream, guys, and it's bad for cardiovascular health and
I
all.
call it a box cutter gene. It's just
Yeah.
a box cutter that going along the cardiovascular system. And the CBS pathway is one of the three. I mean, MTHFR is famous because it's the most efficient way to get rid of homocysteine. That's one of the 3 pathways. CBS pathway is another one, and it goes down. It goes down because that's the image I have in my head because of the mapping of the pathway. Uh, it actually CBS turns the pathway turns homocysteine into things like taurine, but also glutathione, assuming your GSTP1 gene is working well. So you can actually convert homocysteine to glutathione, but that's dependent on these liver detox genes and the CBS gene. And if you don't do that, if you're missing these egress pathways for homocysteine, then your body becomes more inflamed, which then affects your mood. And it's all, yes, it's all connected.
And
And
COMT is also involved in hormone detox
oh,
and a bunch
totally,
of
yeah,
things.
absolutely, yeah. It's involved. It's involved. COMT is a very, very important gene over all around. And um, the and in terms of mood, and I'm on the spectrum. I have an entire comedy show which is available for free on YouTube called Neurospicy. Neurospicy, love, life, and comedy on the spectrum. You can just literally put into YouTube, uh, uh, Dr. Sam Shay, Neurospicy. It's an hour and 3 minutes. And the if someone watching this is kind enough to find it on YouTube and just pop the link into the comments, um, uh, I own, it's a whole hour clean comedy on what it's like to live on the spectrum. And from a genetic standpoint, what the research shows is that there is a higher propensity for people to be on the spectrum with the following gene variations. And shocking is the VDR1 and VDR2 genes, interleukin 6 and TNF alpha. It's the interleukin 10s. It's the three genes we haven't really mentioned yet, but MN SOD, glutathione peroxidase, and catalase. Those are the three main genes that deal with free radical damage in the mitochondria. Those three genes. The methylation gene, the methylation genes as a whole, and those are, and I've got variations up and down the whole gamut of those things. And then you combine that with just really high stressful environment, lots of chemical exposures from food and otherwise growing up, terrible sleep deprivation to the point where it stunted my growth. I didn't have a growth spurt. I never have, because I had crippling insomnia from age 6 to age 18, actually longer. And you get all of these factors with the genetic predisposition, and you get issues with chronic health, and then you also get much more spectrum traits that can be expressed. So, my when people are dealing with very high stressful environments, but they're genetically predisposed to be hypervigilant or a hyperinflamer or a poor detoxer, all of it feeds on itself. And so what you'll see in a lot of genetics reports, including the ones I've designed, stress reduction is a huge part of the program. It's not just supplements for symptoms. It's you have to look at lifestyle, including identifying the sources of stress, current and immediate and emergent, and then the stuff that's chronic and unexamined and unresolved. There's dealing with there's
The
dealing
difference
with stress.
between healthcare and sick care.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So
we've talked about like a lot of scary things in here, and sorry if I cut you off, please finish whatever thought, but I want to orient people towards what can they do about it.
mm-hmm. So the thing that people can do is a couple things. One is take your unique genetics seriously and use. We have the benefit of functional medicine these days. And by I describe functional medicine as the best of Western medicine lab diagnostics with the best of natural medicine's nutrition, lifestyle, diet interventions. So we can use the technology of Western science to identify what is going on and then use the best of natural medicine's solutions to help support what we found. So one solution that can be done is that people get their own functional medicine test. I'm sorry, their genetics test. And for me, I'm no big surprise here is that I've got I've got a functional. I run Fit Genes USA, and this is the test that I've been doing for over 10 years now. I'm the main educator and lead clinician, and I teach other practitioners other clinicians on how to actually do genetics. And where from what's happening right now is that I'm running a Black Friday special that I'm announcing here early that people can take advantage of right now. And what I'm doing is doing 75% off what's normally a $2,000 program down to $499. And what that includes is the genetics test, which includes all of the genes and the analysis of what we just discussed. There's also an additional carb tolerance test, which can genetically determine if you're keto, Mediterranean, high carb, or paleo, whatever is best for you. And it also includes a 6-month DIY implementation program, 6 months of group coaching with me, discounts on supplements, and an entire learning library where people can dive deeper into any individual gene or gene cluster. And that's what's running right now. And I would encourage people to take advantage of it during the Black Friday sale.
Beautiful. So basically, you're helping people to run their genetic stuff, giving them a community to learn in, and doing consults with you at like
It's not consults with it's not consults with me. It's group coaching with me.
Group coaching. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so people can ask questions, and then yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So for anybody who wants to dive deeper on this stuff, or for the person who said that your son is dealing with mold and on the spectrum, this could be a really great thing to look at, because detoxing from anything, and especially mold, like, is actually kind of genetic dependent. It really depends on like what your abilities to move through those things are. And so for anyone who's interested in this, feel free to reach out to myself or Dr. Sam. You can comment here. This will be posted on our feeds, and feel free to comment later and ask questions, and and just tag us, and we'll make sure to answer your questions. And we just want you to be healthy, and we want you to know this stuff, because I feel like a lot of doctors have forgotten that doctor means teacher. Actually comes from the word docere in Latin, and that means teacher. So we want to be here. We want to teach you. We want to teach you how to run your bodies, and we want to teach you how to be sustainable. And it is also one of the reasons that doctors are moving into more of like a community model, is we're trying to break the brainwash that our parents and grandparents dealt with, of like the doctor must save you, and remind you that like you're fully capable of saving yourself if you know how your body works. So that's really what this is about. And if people wanted to learn more, I know you just posted it in the comments, but for the recording where those don't show up, can you just tell people where they should go, or they can message you on Instagram, or how would you like them to reach out?
Sure. They just go to they can go to drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com, and click on the link for the DNA decoded genetics testing, and then the gold program, and they just put the code is Black Friday 75, Black Friday 75 for 75% off the gold program, and they get the whole package of 75% off. And this is, if people are like researching genetics testing, you'll find that the $500 is about commensurate with what people are testing for, like a package, but those other tests don't include the carb tolerance test. They don't include the prioritization that's been done here in FitGenes, and it doesn't and these tests, they really don't, other ones don't include the group coaching, the full, like all these other things. So if you're wanting a full package with group support, this is the best deal I've ever run.
And kind of, I think that's really the only way to do it, because you can get a bunch of genetic data back and like have no clue what to do with it. And so,
Totally.
And this is also the like quality over quantity, right? So this is why I wanted to bring him on, so he could tell you about like what is actually useful, because you can get a whole boatload of data and like half of it's not even relevant or actionable. And so this is all about like stuff that's actionable in your life, and like how you can modify your diet, how you can modify your inflammation, for the people that were asking about inflammation, and like what to do when you're trying to detox. And then also just having some support. I have found hand over hand that people get better faster in community. And like, even if you're not like a group person and you're kind of nervous about it, like just listening to other people's questions, you learn like tenfold more than you would going in by yourself. And this allows us to kind of break the weird component that happened when we started doing health privacy, where it still allows you to have privacy, but you realize that you're not the only person dealing with this. So the loneliness of the experience starts to dissipate. And they've shown loneliness is more dangerous than smoking. So like if you're feeling alone in your health journey, this is a way to not feel so alone.
There's actually I don't know if it's called, I think there's a health minister of loneliness in England. Like they've actually made it a health cabinet position.
Oh man.
That loneliness is one of the greatest health threats to any civilized society. And the irony is that with the rise of technology, where we have wider and wider networks, but smaller and smaller communities, and there's this fracturing of the individual away from community, despite being hyper connected, and that one of the things that when I work with people, particularly when I work with adults on the spectrum or parents of children on the spectrum, one of the first things that I recommend, if either their child or the adult on the spectrum is struggling, is look at your calendar. Do you have at least 3 blocks a week where you are in a social setting? And I even have them color code the calendar a different color for that social section of the calendar. And this is what I do. I look at my calendar every week, and it's like, how many blue social things do I have on any given week? And if it's less than 3, I start scheduling.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate you just gifting your time to people and just for the sake of making their lives better. So for anyone curious, if you have questions, reach out. And yeah, if there was like one really meaningful thought from your own experience, Dr. Sam, that you would love to leave people with, whether they're on the spectrum, off the spectrum, or parents of people on the spectrum, what would you just want them to know?
I can speak from personal and clinical experience that no matter how much one struggles with your physical, mental, and emotional body, that there is always hope. And with the benefit of things like genetic testing or other types of testing, there's not only hope, there's like personalized strategies. So no matter how much people are suffering mentally, emotionally, physically, chemically, there's now roadmaps to go forward, and positive emotions. The difference between a positive emotion and a negative emotion is the feeling of, are you on track towards meeting a need versus are you off track towards meeting a need? So merely getting on track towards the goal is going to improve your quality of life, because it's the on trackiness, to be technical, the on trackiness is what creates and generates the positive emotions. It's actually not achieving the goal. It's the on trackiness that is
Feeling like
stimulating
you're moving
positive.
forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And then for any practitioners listening, Dr. Sam also teaches practitioners. He's one of my teachers, and I highly recommend reaching out to him if you want to learn more about this. So thank you, Dr. Sam. And this will be posted soon, and reach out with any questions.
Thanks, Dr. Christine.
Bye.